Gary DePaul with Unlabeled Leadership. Welcome to episode 47, Dino Ferrari Values People. Here's a shout out to listeners in Russia, and I hope I pronounced the names correctly. In particular, listeners from Saratov Oblast, Altai Krai, Bashkortostan, Moscow, Udmurtia Republic, Primorsky Krai. With that, let's get started. If you're looking for a professional who's calm, cool, collect, who doesn't sweat the small stuff, who can handle the storm without panicking, and who cares about the people around them, you might be looking for Dino Ferrari. I've known Dino for a number of years, kept up with him. We worked together in the early 2000s at Fidelity National Information Services, now Fidelity Information Services, or FIS. Dino is a project manager. In fact, he has his certification in project management, the Project Management Professional, or PMP. He works in Florida, specifically at the Tampa General Hospital, and Dino has extensive knowledge in business process management, mergers, acquisitions, and quite a bit about IT. In fact, that's where he does his project management in the IT area. I asked Dino to be on the show because I knew he would have some fascinating stories worth hearing. Part 1, A Building Block for Character. Much of leadership is about building character or helping other people build character, in particular, maturing their mental and moral qualities, capabilities, and behaviors. While it's easy to say build character, it's a lot harder to do it. And in this story, Dino shares some about the elements of what it takes to build character, and I call one of them a building block for character. Here's Dino to share a story.
One of the sayings or quotes that has been impactful, actually I have a couple. One is from Steve Covey. He talks about what we do has far greater impact than what we say. This has really been profound in my life. If I think back as a child and my upbringing and the childhood that I had, probably would not classify it as orthodox or usual or typical. And what I mean by that is, I grew up in the foster care program from the age of about 6 all the way through being an early teenager. And I got very early in life a lesson on what people do and what people say they're going to do. There have been some occasions where those experiences have been positive. I would venture to say probably far too many have not been positive. I translate that into my work experience as a project manager, as a leader, as an employee, as a coworker, as a parent, as a friend, as a spouse. And there's nothing more powerful than doing what you say you're going to do. Be the person you say you are.
I like how you describe that as crossing over, not just in your personal life, not just in your professional life, but in all aspects of your life. It sounds as if that is a guiding principle that really means a lot to you. And when someone says to you, they're going to do something, it says a lot about their character when they follow through and they actually do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I recognize this probably not at the beginning of my career, but as a project manager, because often project managers don't have direct authority over the people that work on their teams.
Yes, definitely.
We're not a resource manager. And so how do you influence folks that don't report to you, to do what you want them to do? It really kind of starts with just basic. Treat people the way you'd like to be treated, or treat people the way they'd like to be treated.
Yeah.
You can kind of look at that in both respects. If you're asking people to be on time, then you ought to be on time. If you want people to follow up with you, you ought to follow up with people. Just very simple principles. And I think I started realizing that not everybody has that appreciation in the workplace. you would think, hey, we're all professionals and we're all going to treat each other accordingly. Now, having said that, life happens, things happen. We can't always honor what we intended to honor, but there's ways to address that as well.
And even just saying, going to the person where you may have promised something or said you would do something and explaining that you didn't do it, own up to it, be accountable for it, say what you're going to do to correct the situation. And if you're really good at it, you'll say what you're going to do so that it doesn't happen again in a similar situation.
Absolutely. And I think for me, what has driven me to exceed in this area in my career is empathy. So what I mean by that is I know what it feels like to be, stood up or told that, hey, I'm going to get with you, or I'll follow up, or I'll do this. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
I think we've all been on that receiving end. That doesn't feel good. If we can remember, how that made us feel, that is something that motivates us to honor other people. And I think you said it earlier, integrity. It's about character. So it's just real simple. Do what you say you're going to do. Be the person you say you're going to be. If you can't, there's extenuating circumstances. Be courteous. Give somebody, if there's an opportunity, give them a heads up. Be proactive. Hey, something's come up. I'm not going to be able to honor this commitment, but this is what I'm going to do. Is this going to be satisfactory?
There's a lot to be said about being empathetic with the people that you've made commitments, even casual agreements to do things when you're at the point where you're wavering. It's like, man, I really don't want to do this, or I got a conflict, or I got a different priority. Then using that empathy to think about what it would be like for that other person. I agree with you. I think that's a powerful motivator and just a way of, like you were saying before, treating people the way they want to be treated and with respect and dignity.
It's very true. To answer that question, how do we treat people? We don't always know. I don't always know. I've learned, I don't remember what leader it was that taught me this, but it seems so simple, almost silly, kind of stating it out loud. Ask somebody. I think sometimes we get into a position in the workplace, maybe a position of authority, and we have this expectation that we should know how to treat people, how to behave, what to do, but we don't. And it's okay to ask somebody, hey, how do you like to be treated? That addresses treat people the way they want to be treated. If at a minimum, you don't have the opportunity to ask, try to put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to be treated at a minimum?
So when possible, don't assume that you know how people want to be treated. I like that you just ask to clarify and they could surprise you.
Right? Exactly.
Part 2, valuing people. There are several ways that we can show how we value people around us. And one of the best ways is to just simply model the behavior of doing it. In this story, Dino shares how a colleague did just that. He modeled the behavior of valuing Dino. Here's Dino to explain.
An experience I had relatively early in my career. My first employer was a private company. I was the lucky 13th employee. That was a software manufacturing company, and we saw some incredible growth in a short period of time. Many of us just continued to acquire more responsibility, promotion, additional authority, but didn't always have the training to go with that. I certainly fell into that category. It was a fun ride, don't get me wrong, but there were times where I definitely felt like I was in over my head. And about 7 years into my career with this company, things became very challenging. We had a lot of external pressure from competitors, vendors, and it looked like we were going to get bought up, but that didn't happen. So we went through a series of mergers and acquisitions, and that was actually a very interesting process to be part of that. And that lasted for about 2 years. And one of the individuals that came in to oversee those mergers and acquisitions was the president of the North America sales division. And at the time, I was living in California. I think we were in Santa Monica or Marina del Rey. And he basically would come in during the week and then fly home on the weekends. he actually became an informal mentor for me. I reported to him. I was a manager of the customer service and information campaign center, which basically oversaw all the fulfillment of all of our orders and any order campaigns that we had, customer service. So we had a staff of about anywhere from 15 to 30 people, depending on the time of year. And so here was a president. I got to report directly to him. And I knew it was temporary. And I remember my first experience or recognizing how people are valued in the workplace. And I'd never seen an example like this. In fact, I'd seen quite the opposite. I had a one-on-one scheduled with him on a weekly basis. And it probably was my first or second meeting with him. I went inside his office. He closed the door. We started talking as we typically would. Within a few minutes, there was a knock on the door and preceded by somebody opening the door and walking right on in. And the person basically said, "Excuse me, sorry for interrupting. Just had something really quick. Just wanted to run it by you," and proceeded to start talking. The president on the other side of the desk basically said, "Hey, I'm sure this is very important to you. I want to be able to give you the time that you need. However, right now I'm in an appointment. So if you would please go see such and such, she'll be happy to look at my schedule and make sure that we have some time so that we can talk about this item."
Wow.
He was very calm, cool. He had a smile on his face. I don't even remember the person's name, but the person just was like, matter of fact, absolutely. Thank you very much. Very appreciative. I've never seen anyone so gracious in being told no to that point in my career. So that was a great example of how you value somebody's time, right? If you've committed and you have a one-on-one, you basically turn off your phone. You don't answer phones. Back then we didn't have texting or anything like that. We didn't have cell phones. So that wasn't the issue, but there was a phone on the desk. I thought, okay, if somebody at his level can do this, and of course, I've seen all the other examples, kind of a hierarchy thing. You're somebody very important in the organization, a president or director or somebody like that, a VP, and somebody, and I'm just the manager. Often I'd always seen, sorry, Dino, this will just take a minute. And I would always say, oh, absolutely, go right ahead. And I'd just sit there quietly while they talked it out. And then whenever they were done, the attention would be focused back on. And that might happen a couple of times. It can be very disruptive and it is very off-putting, but because everyone did it or does it, depending on the culture and environment that you're in, you get desensitized, I think, to it.
It becomes a norm.
Yeah, it does. And it's, as we know, that's not healthy. I mean, that can be very counterproductive.
I thought it was a great comment of that president to not only let the person know graciously, and it was received graciously, your time is important, his time is important, and it was a way of showing value for the president's own time, the interrupter's time, and your time, and did it in a way of dignity.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It was incredible. And I remember that and this was probably maybe closer to 30 years ago. I try to do the same thing. Whoever I'm dealing with, if it's a team member, if it's a patient at the hospital, that's something that I learned late in my career. I was a task-oriented person. That's the leadership style that was modeled for me. So it was about how fast, how much can I get done rather than focusing on relationships. That exchange really opened my eyes. I thought, wow, am I somebody unique? Does he only treat me that way? No, I found him to treat everybody in the same fashion as I got to know him better. And I reported to him for about 8-9 months. If a guy at that level can treat people that way, I certainly can. And so I tried to embrace that.
We all are human beings. We all have 24 hours in a day. And it says so much about value when you value the other person's 24-hour block of life as equal to your own and respect that and show it through, like you said in the first part, it's what people do that leaves an impression, and whether it's intentionally expressed or not, rather than what they say.
Yes, exactly. Valuing people, I mean, that's the big commodity in the workplace. I've learned that through and through as a project manager. often people don't behave the way you want them to behave because something's wrong. That could be anything, literally. Being able to understand how you can help in a situation comes really from the foundation of valuing people. If you're genuine, you're authentic, people will sense that. You can really get to the heart of what's bothering somebody or a problem or an issue that's going on and remove that obstacle and move past it.
Earlier in the week on Tuesday, Mary Redden, she talked about her career very similarly, that early in her career, she was very task oriented. She was in a high paced organization that was in rapid growth, and it was all about go, 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 get stuff done. She learned later in her career to be more people focused, more relationship focused, just like you were describing earlier.
It's really important if you want to be successful. I think you're only successful as a task-oriented worker for so long, and it has to be a culture that values that and that only. And I don't think those cultures live very long.
Part 3, lifelong learning. Because you're listening to this podcast, my guess is that you are a lifelong learner. Someone who continuously learns about anything. Dino is definitely a lifelong learner, and what you're about to hear is his story about learning and how it's affected him and some of the people around him. Again, here's Dino.
I want to talk about being a lifelong learner. It really goes back to my teenage years where I barely graduated high school. I remember those days very vividly. For some reason, something was implanted in me that I ought to go to college, but barely graduating high school, that really wasn't in the cards for me. I didn't have the emotional, financial, or stability in my life to be able to take advantage of that. I decided to get a one-way ticket. I took off. I went traveling for about 3 years.
International traveling.
Yes, international. I had over 30 visas and ended up staying, visiting, living in over 20 different countries in the Middle East and Africa and Europe, and ended up falling in love with certain cultures and places that I went. So I stayed there longer than I had planned to. So that meant that I didn't get to other places. Money only went so far. I think that's what really spurred and energized my quest for learning. Having experienced so many different cultures, ways of thinking, different languages, although I was not fluent in anything other than English, I did attempt to assimilate when I went to these countries, tried to learn basic language so that I could communicate. It was fascinating. I think it was an extension of my childhood in that I saw all these different ways to live and exist. And growing up in the foster care program was very similar. To get outside of America and see different cultures and different belief systems, different value systems. Lots of common threads, of course, but also a lot of diversity. So that really opened my eyes for learning. I've always had a passion for adventure. When I came back, I knew I wanted to go to school. I enrolled in a local community college in Santa Monica, and I started taking classes. It was expensive, so I had to get a job. And that's kind of what happened was I got in my first class and I needed to get some work. And I found this job with that software manufacturing company that I ended up being with for about 9 years. While I was working, I was going to school at nights and in the summers trying to get my degree. It became a challenge for sure, because as I grew with the company, I had more authority, more responsibility, which required more of my time and energy. But as I went further along in school, the classes became more challenging.
I really admire people who can work full time and go to classes.
It has been an interesting ride. I just recently graduated after 35 years, obviously took some time off here and there, and I've had to acquire many more credit hours than one would have to get a 4-year degree, simply because I changed my major a couple of times. I've been to 5 different schools across 2 different states, each with their own curriculum and what they require for a degree, but wouldn't trade it for anything. It has been an incredible learning experience. It's something that I've had a personal desire to do that. I'm the first in my immediate family to get a 4-year college degree. So that was something that was a personal motivation for me. But I have 3 children. My wife and I, we have 3 children. It sets an example for them that you're never too old and that there's value to being a lifelong learner. I've graduated. Am I going to continue in school? For now, no. I might change my mind down the road, but for now, no. I'm an avid reader, and when I'm not working, I'm not spending time with family. I love to read. It can be books, it can be articles, it can be taking instructor-led classes, going to events, learning events. It's something that's been wired in me. I have a drive to continue learning. It makes me feel good inside, but also just the constant appetite, I guess, for growing.
For you, it's not just the formal instruction, it's informal, it's self-directed. And if I'm right, I believe you earned your certification in project management, the PMP, which says a lot.
Yes, I'm a 16-year PMP now. Yeah, I remember that, sitting for that and studying for that. That was good times.
It's rigorous. Once you earn a degree, like a university degree, they cannot take that away. With a certification, the same is true, provided you do your continuing education that's required.
Yes, absolutely. The example I set to our children, to my friends, to my family, I really, truly, in my heart, believe that's an important element in everyone's life. We do it in different ways, like you said. Some of us formally, some of us informally, some of us both.
One way of leading is just doing that. It's modeling the behavior, and you're modeling your character, and other people, whether you know it or not, or aware of it or not, they're going to be affected by that, and they influenced by that, and they may try to emulate you, whether you know it or not.
Actually, that's a great point. And I think subconsciously, that's what I'm going for. I think it's a difficult place to be, whether you're in leadership in your job, and you feel like you've learned everything that you need to learn and kind of just shut it all down and continue to do what you've always done. If there's anything that's constant and guaranteed, it's change. I'm amazed, at the tender age of being in my 50s, how little I know, how much there is to learn.
My thanks to Dino Ferrari. If you'd like to learn more about Dino, go to the show notes. And if you have a question or a comment and you'd like to share it with me, go to unlabelledarship.com, click the message icon, and you can leave a voicemail message up to 1 minute. I'd like to thank those who contribute to the show. Your contributions help offset some of the production costs. But mostly, I'd like to thank you for listening. Until next time, lead on.